All right. So this one I'm excited about, partly because it plays such a big impact on my own life and career. The next person that I'll have the pleasure to sit down with and talk to is actually the first human being I met when I moved to Austin. So just an ironic thing. Met this guy in 2007, and I looked at him and said, "Oh, that's not an athlete. That's not an athlete at all." But he went on to become the go-to guy for all athletes. He's negotiated over $2 billion worth of contracts in the last 12 years. And as recent as last night, he broke the NFL record with the contract that he negotiated for the Green Bay Packers starting quarterback Jordan Love, 4 years, $220 million. He just set another record last night. And he had to do that because he didn't turn in his actual slides that he needed for the television. So I guess we'll let him slide. I guess he was busy last night. But without further ado, Mr. David Mulugheta. D, what up?
What's up, boss?
Hello.
Okay.
So I'm going to try to do this conversation as if I don't know the answers, okay? So if I skip around at all, feel free to raise your hand and be like, hey, you got to back that up. It's not clicking for us, okay? Yeah, first of all, congratulations on yesterday. That was huge.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Is that why you didn't turn in the slides?
You asked me last night for slides,
Okay.
so that should say a lot about you.
Understood.
I think that says more about him than me, but hey.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. We're going to do it like that today. Okay. Yeah, before we get, like, that's July 26, 2024, right? We know what you did. We know you put more numbers on the board. But, like, let's back it all the way up. Let's back it all the way up. Childhood. Like, did you know from the beginning I want to go on in my life and when I grow up and become a sports agent?
I wish I could say I did, right? Me growing up, and for those that don't know, both my parents were immigrants from a small country in East Africa called Eritrea. So for us growing up, it was either be a doctor or a lawyer. There wasn't really many other options because that's the only two things that they knew. So we were kind of forced into those two opportunities. That being said, I was scared of blood, so the doctor thing wasn't going to work. So I always wanted to be a lawyer growing up. So I wouldn't say I wanted to be a sports agent, but going to law school, I think for me, was always kind of the mindset as far as I can remember. And again, that goes back to my parents kind of instilling in me, hey, we came from a place where the opportunities weren't there. And now that you have them, obviously education is going to be key. They probably saw me run a few times too and were like, yeah, that's not going to work. So they were like, you got to read more books. So for me, it was, go and take advantage of the opportunities you have here. And, those were kind of the two things that were kind of, I guess, instilled in me.
So the goal was to, like, I want to practice law?
I didn't know what lawyer meant. So just doctor, lawyer, I'm going to be a lawyer because I don't like blood at the time, right? But as I got older, and I don't want to skip ahead too far, but I went to the University of Texas at Austin, obviously. So I'm a Longhorn. I don't know how many Longhorns we have here.
There we go.
I love it. But so when I went to UT, I was a finance major. I was a business major, and the goal was to do corporate law at that point, right? I wanted to do corporate law, M&A work, and that was the goal, I guess I would say, from kind of the end of my high school career going into college. For all intent and purposes, I wanted to do corporate law.
Okay. So your family's from Eritrea. Mm-hmm. Were you there too, or?
So I was born here. My parents, Eritrea was going through a long war. I think like a 30-something-year war. My parents immigrated to Italy, where they met and were married. My oldest brother was actually born in Italy, in Rome. And they migrated to the U.S. in, I want to say, around 78, 79. I was born in 82 in Dallas, so born and raised in Dallas.
Okay, got it. And then got introduced to UT, moved to Austin. Then law is on the mind because I don't like blood, so I won't be a doctor. Then where's the introduction, or was there always an introduction to American football and American sports?
Well, I grew up in Dallas in the 90s, so just in case you guys are curious where the delusional Cowboys fans came from, the 90s, the Cowboys is kind of where they were all created. So I've always been a huge, football fan. I watch football. Unfortunately, that was the one sport that, God didn't give me the tools to play.
Did you ever try to play football?
No. I was smart. I was too smart for that. I saw kind of saw the way that things were stacked against me. I was small and slow, so it was like, yeah, there's not a position for that. So didn't really try that out. I played everything else though growing up, but that wasn't a sport that I took too much time on, other than being a big fan, right? I was a huge Cowboys fan growing up. My dad was, my brother was, so I kind of fell in line with that. So yeah, I always loved the game of football. I was always intrigued by it. I watched it growing up, and when as I got older, I kind of realized, that's not going to be for me. So it was kind of like, okay, what's next? But going and being an agent or anything like that, never crossed my mind until I'll say about 2008 or so.
And when did you get to UT?
I got to UT in 2000. And then I graduated. Well, you were already there when I got there. I don't know why you tell this story. For you guys that don't know, Jeremy's about 50 years old. He just ages very well. Jeremy's been at UT before anybody I ever met. But
that's not even close to true.
I got the mic right now. So as I was going, I got to UT in 2000. I took the victory lap and graduated in 2005. So I took the 5-year program. Anybody that had a really good time in college knows about the victory lap, right? So I took 5 years in college, and then I took a couple years off, started my own business. I had a small marketing business here in Austin that I was doing, and I thought I was doing pretty well for myself, right? I had thrown parties when I was in college, when I was in undergrad, and that's how I kind of met a lot of the athletes, right? I knew a few that came from the same high school as me, but when I got here, I had to find a way to make money, so I started throwing parties, and that's back when we had Vince Young and going into the Colt McCoy era, coming off the Applewhite and Sims era, so we were winning a lot of games. So there was a lot of energy around the football team, and we started doing events with the football team, so that was kind of how I was making money. Started my own marketing business, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is going pretty well. I'm making 6 figures, and back then I got no kids, no responsibilities, so I kind of got complacent and sat around Austin for a couple years, and then a bunch of buddies of mine that were in the NFL started coming back to Austin, and they were driving nicer cars than me, and they had nicer things than I did. So I was like, okay, maybe it's time for me to kind of do something else, and what is that going to be? So I ended up just falling into the sports agency business. One of my best friends at the time, Jamal Charles, was going to the NFL, who played running back here at UT and played for the Chiefs for a while. But he was going to the NFL and asked me if I would come along and sit down in some of his meetings when he picked an agent. And at the time, I didn't know much about the business, but I sat down with him, and that was kind of my first introduction to what sports agents are, what they do, how they operate, and so forth.
All right, so to set this scene, you have no idea, like, kind of what goes into being a sports agent. Your best friend just happens to be Jamal Charles. He's going through his process. He asks you to tag along, and you just, like, in there pretending like you know what's going on. Like, how are you contributing to that situation?
For the most part, yeah. I was like, I'm a great judge of character. I don't know much else, but I felt like I was a great judge of character, so I just sat in the meetings and kind of gave him kind of my thoughts on each person he sat down with, and he ended up making a decision to sign with Athletes First, which I would say probably a couple months later, while he was training in California, I went out there to visit him. I got offered an internship with the company, and kind of the rest is history.
Okay, we'll dive into that history a little bit. Tell me about being an intern, because, pause, what is your official title within Athletes First today?
I'm president of our representation practice. So I'm the president of kind of everything we do. We got a president and a CEO who handles more of our business development, but all our representation stuff I handle.
So you're a president within the company that you were an intern for?
Correct.
We got to unpack that.
Okay.
Like, so what does an internship look like for an aspiring sports agent?
Yeah, I mean, it was totally different than I thought it would be. And again, to be fair, it was my first internship, right? So I went there thinking, hey, I'm about to negotiate contracts, and I'm going to be, on the sidelines, and it's going to be a great time, right? I went there, and I was printing items and picking up lunch orders, and I looked around like, yo, I don't want to be a sports agent. This is not fun. So after my first internship there, I actually decided I didn't want to be I didn't want to be a sports agent anymore. So after I was going into my first year of law school, after my first year of law school, I ended up, taking as many courses they let me. I was like, to back it up even a little further, I ended up going to University of Nebraska for law school. And I'm not sure how many of you guys have spent time in Lincoln. Anybody? But exactly.
It was just you.
Exactly. For sure, it was just me. So got there, and I was like, okay, how do I get out of here as soon as possible, right? So took as many hours as they would possibly let me. And they asked me to come back for an internship after my first year. I decided that's not what I wanted to do based on how the first year, first time.
So you turned down the opportunity?
Yeah, I turned it. Well, I was turning down the opportunity to get lunch orders and print and buying things. That wasn't for me, I thought. So after my second year of law school, they invited me back, and an agent there, Andrew Kessler, told me he'd allow me to kind of shadow him and really work on collective bargaining agreement and do background research on contracts, and really allowed me to see what a sports agent actually did on the business side, right? So after that year, after that internship, when I decided, hey, this is something I think I can use my law degree and stay involved in a sport I love. So
you went back.
I'm sorry. Yes, I went back.
Yeah.
I went back.
Yeah.
I think they got that part.
Yeah,
But
I
I went back and did the second internship.
Okay, we didn't know. We didn't know.
Okay.
He didn't say that, so we didn't know.
Okay. So after that, I went back, finished law school in December, and I started full-time at Athletes First. That was back in January of 2011.
Okay. So now you like official sports agent. Got a business card, I'm assuming?
No, not yet. So I graduated December 10, 11. I started, that was the year of the lockout. So they weren't allowing any.
What's a lockout?
Okay, lockout is basically the NFL players and the NFL Players Association were not able to agree to a new collective bargaining agreement. A collective bargaining agreement is what kind of, dictates what happens as far as contracts are concerned, health, whatever it is, everything around the sport of football and the NFL, right? This document is what kind of dictates what goes on. So they couldn't come to an agreement. There was a lockout for a while, and at that time they weren't certifying new agents. So all of 11, I wasn't certified. I had to wait till 12 to take the test, right? They started certifying agents in 2012. I took the test in 12. So my first official, year as an agent was 2012, going into the 2013 NFL draft.
Got it. So up to that point, if you were working with any players, then how do you do that?
I was, gray area there. I wasn't officially supposed to be working with players, but there's always a gray area in there where, we made it work.
Sounds like this guy's a criminal.
Wouldn't say that. But we made it work. There was ways to not officially represent players, but still, be helpful in the recruiting process.
Okay, so then you're in that process. You take the test. You're an agent. How do you get your first client?
Oh, man, that's a long story. So my first client was actually Earl Thomas, again, another UT football player that I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with. And it's a funny story how myself and Earl got acquainted. At the time, my younger brother, to kind of go back a little bit further, I'm the dumbest member of the Mulugheta family, right? I got a little sister and two brothers, and they're far, far smarter than I am, far beyond. But I just got a little luckier, I ain't gonna say luckier because they're doing great, but I got lucky and got to where I'm at. So my younger brother was going to University of Texas, and him and Earl developed a relationship. They were cool. And Earl used to always be around. This is when I had my marketing business in Austin. He would always be around. And after his freshman year, he was was on academic probation, right? Young kid coming from a small town, wasn't really used to a big city, and wasn't on the field. So that kind of, that frustrated him, right? They redshirted him, and as we know, here at UT football, if you're, a position player or a skills player and you're redshirted, that's normally not a good sign for you, right? So he was redshirted, didn't really take school seriously in that time, was homesick, and grades dropped. So university was placing him on academic probation. We were able to have a conversation with the dean where they allowed him that summer to pick up, some extra courses and kind of, bring his GPA up, per se, right? So my little brother and him were really close, and I told Earl, hey, let me back up a little bit further. Earl wanted to join the fraternity that myself and Jeremy are both part of, Kappa Alpha Psi. So I told him, look, if you bring your GPA up, I'll help you get into the fraternity. That summer, he went and I think he brought his GPA up from a 1.9 to like a 3.2, right? He took a bunch of classes. I think he had a 3.75 the first half of the summer, and then a 3.5 the second half, so brought his GPA way up. And I told him, I was like, look, bro, this football stuff is probably not for you. You know what I mean? You're sitting here behind two guys that are probably never played in the NFL. I think at the time it was Eric Jackson and Ishii. I don't remember Ishii's last name. And Marcus Griffin, who's Michael Griffin's little brother. Again, no knock on them guys, but they just weren't NFL guys, right? Great college players. And I told Earl, I was like, look, you're probably not going to go to the NFL. It's not for you. You need to kind of focus on the school side, right? Probably not the smartest comment I ever made in my life.
He told a future Hall of Famer that he's probably not cut out for the NFL. And that's how he started his career.
Well, I was being honest, right? So anyway, he ends up getting on the field the next year and kind of takes off, becomes, freshman All-American, one of the best safeties to ever play college football, So at that time, and that's when again, at the same time, I'm matriculating into doing the internships, and I was about to start at A1. And, the one thing about Earl, who, people that know him know is, he's one of the loyalest guys you ever meet, And he told me, he's like, hey, the fact that you cared about me before I ever, got on the football field, I remember at his wedding, he told me that if it was up to me, he'd probably be a construction worker somewhere, because I told him not to play football. But, I was the best man in his wedding, but he was like, I believe you, I trust you, so wherever you go, that's where I'm assigned. So, again, once, people always ask, how'd you become a sports agent? What was the road to it? And I tell people all the time, like, you can't recreate what happened to me, right? It was luck, right? I don't want, it was luck, being in the right place at the right time, and then taking advantage of this, of that situation. If you'd have told me at the time I had that conversation with Earl that he would have become, a first-round pick, he'd have, one of the best safeties ever played the game, I'd have told you were crazy, right? But again, it just the way life works out sometimes.
But I would challenge that though. I don't know if it's just dumb luck, because like
I never said dumb. Never.
You used dumb earlier when you were
that.
talking about your much
I'm
smarter
just saying.
sibling, so I thought we were just gonna keep using it. But I wouldn't just call it luck, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because what I heard is you were dealt a hand, and you cared about people. Like, that's genuinely what I heard. You cared about somebody before they could be of an asset to you and professionally. You genuinely cared about the person, and then you played the hand you were dealt. I don't know if that's luck.
It worked out, for sure. It worked out. Like, life is about taking advantage of opportunities, right? I think sometimes we don't even really, the problems, we don't realize the opportunity's there when it's there, right? And you're not always going to be prepared for the opportunity, right? Sometimes you just got to take advantage of those opportunities, and you're going to have some fumbles. You're going to have some situations where maybe you don't know what you're doing. But these opportunities only present themselves so many times, I think, for people. And if the goal is to take advantage of them. And luckily, I was in a position I was able to do that.
And then you entered a super competitive field, right? Was it just like open arms? Everybody's like, come here, let me show you the ropes, let me show you how things work? Or like, how do you begin to even go down the road of success in a field where, from the outside looking in, it looks like the people that own the pie are trying to box everybody else out?
No, for sure. There's definitely a barrier to entry when you get into the business. There's only it's a business where there's only so much, I guess, capital, right? There's only so many players that are drafted every year. So it's definitely a cutthroat business. There's a lot of sharks in the business. But for me, like you said, I always thought if I was genuine, and I was true to who I was, that things would work out. So my first, after Earl Thomas, obviously, again, as you would call it, dumb luck. He, got drafted early in the first round, had a, phenomenal rookie year. I was able to kind of parlay that into representing a lot of UT football players, right? That's kind of where it started, right? People really looked up to Earl, and word of mouth, right? As you know, word of mouth is probably the what's the word I'm looking for?
It's the biggest compliment you can get.
There you go, right? So, he spoke highly of me, and I think he spoke highly of me because, again, it wasn't a transactional relationship that we had. There was much more before that. So I think that lent itself to him being able to speak so highly that ended up causing me to be able to represent, I want to say, from 2010 to 2020, I represented every first-round player out of UT. And a bunch of that, again, I owe to Earl.
Let's not skip over that.
Yeah.
You entered the industry in 2010 unofficially.
Correct.
And from the moment you entered the industry until 2020, you represented every first-round player that came out of the University of Texas.
Correct.
And that's just luck.
Well, right place, right time. Again, it worked out, right? So that was super helpful. So I would say kind of the big part of my business over the first 3-4 years I was a certified agent was University of Texas. And from there, and being able kind of to create what, has become known as the family tie kind of legacy at this point is, really developing that bond between not only myself and the clients, but the clients amongst each other, right? I think that really lent itself to other players wanting to be a part of that. We're really big on not only having a relationship personally with our clients, but making sure our clients have a relationship with each other, right? Now, those are different touch points, right? And now, I would say I have the highest retention rate in the business. I don't get fired, but I think a big part of that is because you're not only firing me, now you're firing all your brothers that you've got to know and the relationships you've created being a part of our organization, right? So now it's like, okay, not that anybody would want to fire me, right? But if they did, it's like, okay, do I want to fire these other relationships? So I think, I was very intentional on creating that atmosphere, that culture where, hey, this is more of a family than it is just transactional business, which I think a lot of guys look at their agents in a very, very transactional way. This guy does my contract. I'll talk to him in 3 or 4 years from now, and then he'll do another contract for me, and that's kind of how that relationship goes. For me, it was important that, hey, how can I make myself a lot more useful? How do you become indispensable to your guys, right? Where not only are they looking at you for, hey, this person's going to do my contract, but, playing that mentor role, that big brother role, so that relationship, goes far beyond what up to that point I think was very transactional business.
And is that something that like the whole agency has adopted as a concept?
For sure. I think, the name of the agency is Athletes First, right? So we do try to put the athlete first, and I think that culture has spread throughout the whole agency, right? It's how do you create that bond amongst brothers, and not only amongst each other, but like I said, not only with the representation, but amongst each other, which, you don't really see elsewhere.
Right. So then my question is like, again, I guess we just call it luck, but like, where does the strategy come from? Where did that specific strategy come from when looking at a market, understanding how that market operates, and then understanding the twist that you were going to put on in order to aid you in gaining market share?
Well, when I got in the business, the first thing I asked when I interned was, I asked myself is, how do I get a job here, right? The Athletes First gets 4,000 applications every summer, spring, fall sessions, or whatever internship periods we have. So I was lucky enough to get an internship based off the fact that I had a relationship, right? But that's not going to get me the job. So in my mind, it's like, how was I going to take this opportunity that had availed itself to me and then make this into, kind of create a bigger opportunity for myself? So I would literally go ask everybody at the firm, like, in what way can I make myself indispensable, right? I don't want to just print and bind. I don't want to do that. How can I make myself indispensable where when I leave, there's actually going to be an impact here? It's not, he was another intern, one of the 5, 6 interns this session, and we're going to have 5, 6 next session, right? How could I create that? So what I ended up doing while I was there was I started setting up meetings with players in college, right? As an intern, you're not really supposed to do that. But again, if you reach out to one of the agents there and say, hey, I got you a meeting set up with this player at this university, it's going to be like, oh, shit, you know what I mean? That's a lot more important than you grabbing my lunch, right? So I would do that, and I would make sure I did that with several different agents where, before they knew it, they had a meeting set up with a star player at this school or that school, and that was just a matter of, again, I grew up, like I said, my background is I had to be able to relate to a lot of different people where I grew up, right? My parents were East African. Culturally, it was a little different growing up, so I had to figure out how to be able to relate to the different people that I was around. So I think that really aided in my ability to relate to people when I got older, right? So for me, it was how do I make myself, when I leave here, that the agents will be like, yo, we don't want him to leave, right? And I think that's what I did different than a lot of different interns who were just kind of checking the box, right? Hey, they've asked me to do this, I'm going to do that. They asked me to do this. And again, there were interns there that were much smarter than me, that probably worked harder and did a great job with what was asked of them, right? But for me, it was like, okay, I might not be the smartest person in the room. I might not be able to work the hardest, right? But it's like, what can I do that they're not doing? How can I make myself different? How can I differentiate myself? And for me, that was like, okay, I'm going to set up meetings so that I'm making these agents' jobs easier, so they're going to want to give me the opportunity, So that was what was important to me.
So I look at that and I'm like, oh, okay, so he's taking initiative with a unique strategy based on what he's seeing by paying attention very closely to his surroundings. Do we put that in the luck category too, or where do we put that?
I think at that point, I had to create some strategy, right? Because again, it's how do I differentiate myself? I don't want to be the intern that said, hey, I used to have an internship at Athletes First, right, and now I'm trying to find a job, right? The door is open here. I don't want to go try to find another door to open. If this door is open, how do I walk through it, right? And for me, it was about creating a plan and kind of acting on that plan. And again, it worked out.
So then, if we jump in at this point, let's call it 2014, 15, when do you expand out of home? You've been in Dallas your whole life. You moved down the street to Austin. You had a whole bunch of relationships there that lended towards getting you started. And now you've implemented a pretty unique strategy to try to, add value and get customers, get clients. What's the strategy now to scale? How do I go outside of Austin, Texas to replicate the same thing?
For sure. So initially, again, Earl's kind of where it started, right? That was kind of where everything began. the University of Texas kind of took it to the next level. And then from there, I think that at the time in the industry, there were not a lot of options for players, for people that looked like them, that were at credible platforms. Right? Athletes First was I tell people this all the time, right? I don't know that my story goes the same way if I didn't have the opportunity at Athletes First, right? That platform there, it's like selling Pepsi, right? It's a lot easier to sell Pepsi than Kroger brand soda, or I don't even know if y'all know what Kroger is. Is there a Kroger in Austin? No? HEB brand soda, right? People are going to be drawn to Pepsi and Coke before they're drawn to HEB brand soda. So I think the opportunity that availed itself to me when I was at Athletes First, I knew that I had a very good product to sell, right? I knew that. So then it was a matter of, okay, now taking advantage, and everybody has different things that they can take advantage of. For me, I was young, I was African-American in a sport that's dominated by African-American players, right? So it's like, okay, I have a certain advantage in this marketplace that I might not have in others, but in this marketplace I do, so how do I take advantage of that? And for me, it was all, I didn't have a wife and kids at the time, so I lived on the road, right? If I was recruiting a kid, I was going to be there. There was no, I was going to make the sale that, hey, I might not be the most experienced. I might not have the name that these other agents have, but nobody's going to outwork me. And I'm going to show you that because every weekend I'm going to be here with you. You're going to see me every day. So for me, it was like, again, how do I differentiate myself? I knew the Tom Condons and the Ben Doggers at the time didn't have the time to spend. They had everything else that I didn't have. They didn't have the time, right? Between their families and their clients and everything else they had going on, they couldn't be here every day, right? So for me, even when I was in law school, I would fly out every weekend, right? Once I decided that's what I wanted to do after the second internship, I'd fly out every weekend. I'm in Iowa,
How could you afford to fly out every single weekend?
Man, I was a lot of credit card debt. I had some money saved up from obviously what I was doing while I was in school, but a lot of credit card debt at the time. I knew the plan, though. I had a vision, right? And unless you're, a lot of times you can't be halfway in on your vision, right? If you got a vision.
Hold on. I'm sorry. Say that again.
Yeah, you can't be halfway in on your vision. If you have a vision and you don't believe 100% in your vision, there's no way you're going to, have other people going to believe in your vision for you, right? So for me, I had the vision. I knew maybe it wasn't the smartest financial decision at the time to rack up credit card debt, but I knew for me to be at any point to be able to get to where I wanted to get, this was going to be part of the process, right? So, like I said, I figured out again, how do I differentiate myself from everybody else? And the only thing I had at the time was time, right? And that's what I used to my advantage. If I'm telling you I'm going to outwork other people and you see me every single day, you start buying into the fact like, damn, he is going to outwork everybody else. And then when you also have the platform behind you that you're not asking them to sign with, Mulugheta agency at the time, which it wouldn't have meant anything to them. You have all these other guys where you're like, hey, as a firm, we represent, Aaron Rodgers, we represent Carson Palmer, we represent, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, all these guys. I think kind of, took advantage of that, right? And, I think that was kind of what differentiated me at the time.
So what I'm hearing is you've identified where you're specifically at in your vertical, and then looked at what you had to your disposal and what you could use to get you from where you were to where you wanted to be, and then just put the work in.
You make it sound a lot better than I do,
I'm just trying to get the cliff notes on what's actually happening.
Yeah, no, I got you.
This is what I'm hearing, and what I'm not hearing is luck. Does anybody else hear luck? Yeah, why did he start with telling us that it was luck? That's not the truth. Okay, all right, I'm sorry. Let's move on then. So the players start identifying and relating to not only you looking like them and relating to them culturally, but to your work ethic, and then trusted, I'm assuming, if they didn't all the way trust you in your youth or your lack of experience, they trusted the platform that you had behind you and their experience. So then you got a pretty strong cocktail right there. What's next? How do we start now? We believe in the product that we have, and we figured out the formula. Now, how do we start getting market adoption?
No, for sure. I think the other part of it now is when I'm at Athletes First, also now the other side of it, it's a great platform. But I also knew that, and maybe this is me just always thinking worst case scenario. I knew that, okay, now how do I now that I'm an agent, I still have to put myself in a situation where I'm indispensable to the company. I was so afraid of losing that. It's like, how do I keep that going, right? So it got to the point where I would do everything A to Z for all my clients, right? I'm booking flights. We have a group called our CRD team, which is our client relations department that's supposed to handle that. But for all my guys, I would literally book every flight. I'd make sure their family got to town. If I had to go pick them up from the airport, I'd go pick them up from the airport. I literally would do everything from A to Z. So when my players thought of me, it's like, yo, I can't even operate without this person, right? He's doing, some guys, I was checking their emails for him. Like, I'm literally like, what do you need done? I'm going to do it, right? There's no job too small. I'm negotiating the contract, but I'm literally doing everything A to Z. Because again, in my head is I have to be indispensable. I got to be somebody that not only the agency and the agents can't live with, but the players can't live with either, right? And I had seen times where agents would leave firms and the players would stay at the firm because the loyalty is to the firm and not the agent. Because once you get to the agency, a lot of times you're introduced to so many different people. Hey, here's your marketing guy. Here's your PR person. Here's your CRD person. You're introduced to all these different people that at some point it's like, okay, well, this guy does my contracts, but I have these other 5 touch points that I really like here. And, there's somebody else at the agency that probably can do my that can do my contract. So for me, again, just being a contrarian is like, I need to do everything I can to be indispensable to the players and to the business. So I would literally do everything A to Z. And I think, and this was just on accident, it lended to the fact that now my players all were like, yo, my agent is different, right? A lot of other players like, yeah, my agent does my contract, but then so-and-so does this. So I'm at every marketing shoot, literally everything A to Z for my guys. So that started to build that culture where now they're looking at me more like, hey, this is family, right? I'm at the baby showers. I'm everywhere. You can't get rid of me. Mm-hmm. I'm like a bad cold.
I believe that.
Yeah. So I was doing everything. And, this was, I didn't even realize at the time, but I was creating this culture amongst between myself and the guys who are like, yo, this guy's actually like family to me, right? And now when they're talking, when I'm in a recruiting meeting with a Jordan Love, a Deshaun Watson is calling in like, yo, this is who you need to sign with and this is why, right? I'm in a recruiting meeting with a Derwin James and Jalen Ramsey's calling in like, hey, it's not even close. These are very organic relationships now. You can tell the difference when you're having conversations with players and players are talking amongst themselves when it's organic or it's a sales pitch. Like, hey, my agent wants me to say this, so I'm going to say it. So I think for me, just being so scared of losing what I had, it caused a chain reaction where my guys felt like I honestly can't lose this person. And not only that, but this is the single biggest piece of my success has been that my clients want to see me win the same way I want to see them win on the field. And you don't get that in this business, right? Again, it's a very transactional business where it's like, hey, this guy does my contract, he charges me whatever percent, I pay him, and that's kind of the end of the relationship. For me, I came to find out that, and I came to learn that my clients wanted to see me win the same way I would cheer for those guys on the football field. Again, and it had to do with everything else we talked about, being young, being relatable, and, all the other things that, came with me. I found that my guys were cheering for me, and they were in rooms talking about me that I wasn't in a manner where it's like, I want to see you win. They'd call me like, who are we signing to the family this year? Hey, have you seen this player? Have you recruited this player? And again, I just don't think that's what's going on in other situations. So I think inadvertently I had created that, and when I realized that, then obviously you want to continue to cultivate that, right? But I would say that is the one biggest piece of my success is the fact that those guys wanted to see me win and they cheered for me.
But that sounds to me like that's the fruit of high character. Like what you just described is somebody that has high character, and obviously it's business, so you got to be strategic. You have to figure out a way to win. That is your responsibility, but you can win a certain way. And then what's interesting is the fear part, because I think a little fear is good.
For sure.
I think every now and again you should wake up in the middle of that night. Like a little fear is good, right? Because it creates almost an obsessive nature of the thing that you're trying to build or create. What's also additionally interesting is to know that like that agency put all those things in place to create efficiency, and you're like, yeah. But like that doesn't lend itself towards scale. So immediately as I'm listening to you, my mind is going to like, well, how many hours is he putting in? If you've gotten rid of all of the things put in place to create efficiency, and then you're working at a high level consistently, then what does that kind of work ethic look like?
But I agree with you, right? Not the most efficient, for sure. But I think what a lot of people have missed is this is a relationship business, right? This is not Pepsi. You're not selling commodities. You know, every bottle of Path water is the same fluid ounces. It's made with the same whatever. It's all the same, right? But when you're dealing with people, what you find out very quickly is what works for one person is not going to work for the other, right? I can walk into a room with you and do A, B, and C, and you're like, that's the coolest motherfucker I ever met, right? Yeah. I could do the exact same thing for the next person, and you're like, that dude's so lame. I would never, I don't want to talk to him again or any of that, right? Yeah. So for me, the efficiency doesn't work for everybody, right? If you walk into a building and you meet somebody, they're like, hey, I'm gonna do this person gonna do it, and that. Okay, that's cool. And now, okay, this is my company, they work for me, right? But if you walk into a building and this person say, I'm going to do A, B, C, D, and E for you, and they do A, B, C, D, and E for you, that relationship between you and that person is gonna be totally different, right? So for me, I figured, okay, yeah, from a business standpoint, it's easier to scale the other way. But for me personally, coming from where I came from and trying to accomplish what I was trying to accomplish at the time, it was going to be easier for me to scale. It was going to be difficult, but it was going to be easier for me to scale with the support of my guys, right? Me on my own going into a room saying, hey, you should sign with me because A, B, and C. It was going to take me years to get to the point where Tom Condon was. It was going to take me years to get to the point where Ben Dogger was and these superstars of the agent world. So for me, it was like, what's the shortcut to get there? And for me, it was the relationship part of it. That is the part that I could win at now, right? And so that's the part that I attacked.
What's ironic about that is like what you identified as the shortcut was the path with more hard work and dedication. Sure. Like the shortcut, when I think shortcut, I think, oh, okay, we found a way around the work. But in reality, we just found a way to get to success quicker. Correct. And that requires more.
Yeah, there was no way I was going to do, $1 billion in contracts in 2 years or 3 years, right? So I had to figure out, okay, I can't catch up to them, right? I'm not going to be able to walk into the room and say, hey, I've done all these contracts in the next 2-3 years, right? These are deals that these guys have done for 10, 15 years and have done a great job at it. So it's like, again, it's all about differentiating yourself in this marketplace, right? Because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of gyms in Austin, right? Why are people drawing a Kollective? Why do people want to be here? There's a certain culture that's been built here. There's their differentiating factor here. So in any business, that's what you want to be. You want to have something that differentiates you from everybody else where people are drawn to that.
Okay, so then I'd imagine the next question is simple. You get to a certain point, it has to be impossible to keep that up, right?
For sure, and at this point, I have started to delegate a little bit more, mostly because my wife said I had to. But
so you're saying all of the success and hard work came before the wife?
Oh no, I didn't say that.
Okay,
I did not say that. I did not. She was there shooting in the gym with me for sure. Okay. Met my wife in college. So, but no, I think like I said, at this point I've gotten to a point now that I do have to delegate. A lot of the work has been done. The infrastructure has been built. And yeah, I mean, at some point it does become impossible, right? I think I'm in upwards of 70 clients, 65, 70 clients. You can't keep adding to that and having that same relationship with all the guys. So I have brought in younger agents. I have taken advantage of my personal CRD team. So at this point, you have to continue to grow out your team. But I'm very strategic on who I bring in, right? If you don't have that same passion to work with guys, we're in a service business, right? We're not. You have to you got to really love that part of it. You got to love serving, right? And if you don't have that, you can't work with us, right? So you have to be very intentional on how you're building it out, and if it takes time, right? So I'm okay doing the work until I find the right people that I feel like I can delegate to. I'm not going to delegate just for the sake of delegating and freeing up time, right? I'm a delegate because I feel like I found somebody who's going to do the work, just as good or better than me, So for me, yes, it has gotten to a point where I have to delegate, and I'm slowly starting to figure out how to do that.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense to me. So then I want to shift gears a little bit. I want you to talk to me about what does it feel like to go from climbing a ladder to now being the man on top of the hill?
I think just the goals change, right? The goal was to get to the top. Now it's how do you stay there? I think, you cannot get complacent. You got to figure out ways to stay relevant because obviously the kids are getting younger. I'm getting older. Not as old as you, but I'm getting older. So it's just continuously figuring out ways to stay relevant. Obviously, it feels good, right? I'm in a position now that I never thought I would be in, right? Like I said, both my parents immigrants from small country in East Africa, coming here, not knowing the language, not having much to their name, and kind of really instilling that hard work and that hard work in us, right? and seeing where we're at now, and kind of seeing how proud my parents are, and my whole family, being able to see that. So it's now like, okay, how do I stay here? So I don't think the work or the goals. I mean, work changes. I think it's just more what your goals change.
Right. So then, what is like? It's the goals are identified pretty easily when you're first getting started.
Yeah.
I want my first client. I want to grow my brand. I want to get more athletes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then when you get to where you've been able to achieve, like, what do those goals even look like?
So two things, right? One of them is you realize the impact you can have on these young guys, right? You see guys, you're with kids when they're 19, 20 years old, all the way to when they start having children. I'm sorry, they get married, start having kids, well, whatever order. They start having kids, get married, kids, married kids, whatever you want, how you want to put it. But through that whole process, and now just because of this, the climate we're in, these athletes are starting to realize that they're more than athletes, right? They're using their platform to become, entrepreneurs, right? Whether you want to get in a real estate franchise, whatever it may be, is having that impact and being able to say, hey, I've done this before. This is what works. This is that what doesn't work, and serve as that role. Now that has become important. And then the second part of it is just, pure competition. I don't want to lose. I've gotten to a point now where I'm accustomed to being the best at what I do, right? And I don't
Say it
want
with your chest, man.
I don't want anybody to take that from me, right? And I know that's going to come from hard work. You're not just going to stay at the top or near the top, or however you want to put it, by relaxing, right? So now it's a matter of, it's purely competition. Every year the draft comes, I want to have the best draft class. Every time I do a contract, I want to do the best contract, right? Obviously, that comes from a love for the clients as well. You want, they're giving you the opportunity to work with them, so you want to make sure they're taken care of. But there's a pure competition. I'm sure that most of us have in us. We want to be the best at what we do, no matter what it is you do, right? So, for me, those are, I would say, the two things now that kind of drive me to do what I do.
And what's the biggest struggle now?
Time. I would say time.
Is it amazing? When you first started, you had nothing but time.
I had all the time in the world.
And that was your advantage.
For sure.
And now it's the struggle.
For sure. And there's younger guys that are going to take advantage of that, right? That I might not have the exact same time. So now it's a matter of how do I create those advantages for me, right? And that's a constant, I don't want to say struggle, but that's a constant, thought. Is like, how do I create my advantages at the point I'm at in my life now, right? So, yeah, I would say that is the biggest kind of obstacle now.
The landscape of your industry has changed with NIL now hitting the college ranks, where these kids can make money earlier, but can't sign earlier with agents. So how do you and Athletes First stay competitive? What are y'all doing differently in order to establish those same relationships years ahead of time before you'll see a return?
Yeah, I think you just have to kind of change your your way of thinking, right? It used to be a situation where we're going to talk to guys, we're going to identify guys as NFL guys early, as early as you can, right? And most of the time that was in college. And the goal is then to obviously represent them, help them get drafted. The first contract's not going to be a huge money maker. The second contract is, right? Now you have to figure out a way to not only identify these kids younger, because a lot of these kids are signing with maybe not a specific agent, but an agency for NIL when they're in high school, right? In certain states or right after. So now you're just having to make that investment from a time standpoint, money standpoint, a lot earlier. And again, NIL is fairly new. It's only a few years old, so I think that's a constant kind of that's constantly changing still, right? It hasn't kind of leveled that yet. We're still trying to figure it out. But you're having to identify guys a lot sooner. You're having to create an NIL department that's going to be able to deal with these guys. Because if you are, we're already having trouble dealing with the amount of guys we have. You can't then, now you got 20, 30 young kids that you have to deal with, for 3, 4, 5, 10 years. At some point, if you're dealing with a kid in 9th grade now, you're talking about 4 years of high school, you're dealing with 3 years at least in college, that's 7 years, then you're dealing with 4 years of a rookie it's 11 years until they're profitable, right? Yeah. So from a business standpoint, you got to kind of take that into account, and you got to kind of, figure out how wide of a net you're going to cast in a high school standpoint. So again, I think NIL has definitely changed the landscape, but just like, that's in any business though, right? That's in any, if you're in a gym business, you can work out at home nowadays, right? You can, people can download
Stop
apps.
reminding people of that.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. Yeah. But my point is, you have to constantly evolve, right? Yeah. So I don't think there's any difference whether we're doing it here from the sports agent standpoint or anything that anybody does. You're having to constantly evolve.
What's next for you?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. You know, I've definitely tried to put the entrepreneur hat on, and there's different things that I'm involved in. You know, in the city of Austin, my wife and I started a charity, so you know, we're that's super important to us. So you know, we're diving into that part of it. And then again, like I said, I think next is how do we start creating billionaires, right? As a football player, we've created a lot of millionaires, right? And I don't want to say we created because obviously the guys are putting in the hard work and we're kind of helping them get to wherever they're trying to get to. But I think now again, where society is at, there's opportunities for these guys to become billionaires. Forget millionaires at this point. It's like, how do you grow your brand, your platform, and create billionaires now instead of millionaires? So for me, you know, from a football standpoint, I want to be part of helping somebody become the first football billionaire. So that's kind of the next goal.
Last question for you then. When you decide to hang it up, when it's done, what do you want your biggest impact to be? What do you want to be remembered for most in your industry?
I hope to create more businessmen than just athletes, right? The athlete part of it is cool, but I don't feel like I really played that much of a role in you being an athlete, right? That's God-given. That's your hard work. Obviously, I help you monetize that, right? But for me, it's how many entrepreneurs, how many businessmen, how many great fathers, how many those type of guys that I can help mold and create. For me, that's more important because again, like I said, the football part of it. It's only so much credit you can take for that, you know what I mean? But the other stuff I can have much more of an impact on than them becoming an all-pro football player, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So impact on others, the
There you
full
go.
man. Well, strategy, intention, hard work, doing things that you were not asked to do in order to create value for yourself, to you, your company, and your clients, and a lot of luck. A lot of luck. I would want to first, before we let you go, I want to shout out your beautiful family that's here, your oldest son, your youngest sister, and your father that I've had an opportunity to know for a very long time. Special man. I don't know how you put up with him as long as you did. Honestly, any of you. But I love you guys like family. I'm glad you got a chance to see this. You're a special man. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate you guys.